Right. And those on Zoom, can you confirm if you can see the screen, Journey of the Soul?
Yes, I
Yeah,
can see
okay.
it.
All right, everything's working perfect. Amazing. Just gonna wait another minute. Less than four. See if anybody else comes. Well, we're expecting another two people. Actually, while we're waiting, we'll start with a joke, as the rabbis like to do. Well, the topic of tonight's discussion is going to be heaven and hell. What happens after? So we've got a lot of jokes in Judaism. We have a lot of jokes on these topics. So here's a really good one. I'm going to read it because it's I don't want to mess it up. It's a funny joke. It had me cracking up when I read it. So an Illinois man left the snow-filled streets of Chicago for a vacation in Florida. His wife was on a business trip and was planning to meet him there the next day. When he reached his hotel in Florida, he decided to send his wife a quick email. Unfortunately, he missed one letter in the email address, and his note was directed instead to a grieving widow whose husband had passed away only the day before. When the widow checked her email, she took one look at the monitor, let out a piercing scream, fell to the floor in a dead faint. At the sound, her family rushed into the room and saw this note on her screen. Dearest wife, just got checked in. Everything prepared for your arrival tomorrow. P.S. Sure is hot down here. So yeah, that's a just a comical. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you. It's
really funny.
I always think it's funny because some cultures think that hell is cold.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Norway.
Like Norway,
Interesting.
cold.
In Judaism, there is a concept as well, Gehenim shel Shelag and Gehenim shel Esh. But yeah. All right. So to open up the conversation, going to start with our weekly video. That's going to be the opening idea for today's lesson.
Birth and death are as contradictory as night and light. But they are strangely associated with an identical Hebrew word, kever. Kever means a tomb where a body is buried. But kever also means a womb where life is formed. A womb is a gateway to life, while a tomb is a gateway to afterlife. But is there an afterlife? Or does laying a body to rest in a grave mark the absolute end? If it were within our power to interview a soul, we would undoubtedly glean insight into afterlife. Instead, we have chosen to eavesdrop on a set of twins in their mother's womb to shed some light on the before life.
Hey, twin, I'm scared of birth.
Why?
It's the end of existence. We get ejected. We're finished.
I'm also anxious, twin, but I'm not scared. Birth is supposed to be a transition to the real life.
Huh. Don't give me the hiccups with your after-birth real-life fantasies. How can life be supported without an umbilical cord and amniotic fluid?
Well, maybe it's a radically different form of life. Maybe we won't need the cord.
I wish you were right. I keep kicking that thing away from my neck.
Stop spinning for a minute and imagine, twin. After birth, we will enter a ginormous universe filled with light and with air that we will breathe through our mouths.
Come on, grow some brain cells, will you? Mouths are not for breathing. Besides, if your postnatal paradise existed, why has no one ever returned from that realm? Forget it. Once we leave here, we collapse into cold, dry nothingness and wither into eternal gloom.
I don't think Mother would allow that to happen. She nurtures us in this cozy womb. She sends us nutrients for months on end. For what purpose? Just to end it all with birth? No. Mother has greater plans for us than that.
Now you're beginning to sound infantile. Do you see a mother lurking in some corner of the womb? Not a trace. Show me a mother. And as for your nutrients, can't you feel that annoying cord? Don't exchange empirical for fantastical.
Thankfully, these two delightful infants made it safely to the other side. They grew up in the universe that one had described and the other had denied. And until today, they continue their clamorous debate. It is only that the topic of contention has slightly shifted from, is there life after the womb, to, is there life after the tomb?
Hey, so I'd like to open up with to go around the table if anyone wants to share. And we'll sort of come back to this at the end of the lesson. What do I think I know about the Jewish view of afterlife? And is there anything that perhaps I would like to know that I don't know? Any questions maybe that I would like to have? If anyone wants to open up any.
Nobody has proved that there is an afterlife, so that we know. But we have heard of stories of people accidentally, being dead and then coming back and then giving stories. And whether we believe or not, it's funny how they have the same story, whether they tell you the story in the West, in Europe, Africa, it is the same thing that they're talking about, which could lead to believe that there is for sure an afterlife on that basis.
Right, so I think you're referring to it's called near-death experience, which
Right.
some people, hello, sir, welcome. So we're actually on page 128 in the book. We're just starting, so good to have you here, Cyril. Welcome back from South Africa. And everyone has also regards from Adi, who is stuck in Israel still. So he said he may join on the Zoom, but you never know if he has to run to the shelter, and it's a bit later in Israel as well. So you're pointing to the question as number one, no one has really proven the idea of the afterlife, but there is this concept of near-death experience, which many people have recorded their first-hand experiences, and there are similarities. For example, this is sort of going off topic because near-death experience is not the same as afterlife. It's the person is sort of whatever. Many people who describe the near-death experience describe the idea of being almost like in a third party, hovering over their body, sort of their soul, and they're sort of seeing everything from not from the first person, but from a different perspective, where they sort of see everything happening around them, and feelings of close feelings to their loved ones and things like that. That's some of the common things that people described.
It's similar the story of the first 4 days that we were to.
We said that the soul goes back and forth for 3 days. Yeah. Yes. So yeah, anyone else wants to share any other, what do you know about, if you had to just summarize, what is the Jewish belief on the afterlife? What happens? Or are there any other gaps in your questions that you have or things that you would like to know about that topic? Yes?
So just so you know, like when I grew up, I was at a Reformed Jewish synagogue, and we were always told that there wasn't no hell. Like that's a Christian thing, that Jews don't believe in a hell or a Satan or anything like that. And they also didn't say that we weren't taught anything about heaven either. So, but
That's the closest to God, right?
no, well, we weren't taught about that. So then, and then the other thing is, in addition to that, is that the one thing that always bothers me is that they're always talking about people, but I mean, there's animals and there's bugs and and I know the whole thing is that they don't have a soul, but I mean, I just don't.
Actually,
think
everything
that-
has a soul,
Okay, so then I just don't think that
but not the same type of soul as a human soul.
I think that there was a design for an afterlife, it would include animals and other things that were living, I think.
Good.
that
So we
afterlife
touched
should
on
have
that in lesson 1.
Yeah, I know.
So if you want to, but I'll just tell you very briefly about, so everything has a soul. The soul is what makes everything exist. Generally speaking, there are different levels. So there's the inanimate, then there's the vegetation. So vegetation are things that can actually grow. And then there's animal life, which has, they have instincts and they have, a lot more sort of features and than vegetation that also is alive. If you cut a vegetable, it dies. So it also has the idea of life and death. And then you have human beings. So all of them have souls. Souls is what makes everything exist. But we have human souls. Animals have animal souls. Actually, next week when we talk about reincarnation, we'll touch on that as well. But what happens in terms of after we pass away? So we said that death isn't the end of everything. The soul still lives. So, but what's the difference between human beings? What happens in the afterlife versus animals? So the difference is that animals also they have a soul, and when they die, their soul still remains alive. The only difference is that the animal after it dies doesn't remain alive as um, a unique um, individual, so to say. Meaning, so the soul life of the animal, what happens is after it dies, gets subsumed back in the creator. So if there's anyone familiar with the concept of the Merkava, which means the divine chariot, where you've got this is if you ever read verses in the Tanakh and Yechezkel and Ezekiel, it has these descriptions of a chariot
Yes.
with there's the
Forehead.
yes, the four heads, exactly. So one of them is the lion and the ox. So that is actually the spiritual source energy of the soul of animals. What happens is after animals die, their souls, they don't remain alive as an individual distinct entity, but they get subsumed back into their source. Whereas human beings, we have our human soul remains almost as its own sort of personality as its soul, and what happens, that will be today we'll be discussing what actually does happen. As to your first point, as to like, do Jewish people believe in heaven and hell, or is that just a Christian belief? What does everyone else think?
Specifically the hell, though.
Specifically the hell.
I
Yes.
don't, I've never seen that as a Christian belief.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
yeah, because they take from the Old Testament too, it's not just.
I mean, you saw that as something which is Jewish.
No,
Well,
yes, it comes from.
Okay.
Why?
The whole concept of fire and Satan and things like
Right.
that, and sin, and all of these concepts are really New Testament,
No,
aren't they?
Satan's there in Genesis.
They take from the Old Testament, but they're also superseded with their own stuff.
Like
So,
what?
well, I mean, the whole New Testament is like their kind of take on things. They kind of discount most of the Torah.
No, they don't,
They do.
no, definitely not.
It's going a bit off topic because there's different within Christianity. There's different subsects and etc. But it's all, but so
But they all have the same idea.
So
of
the answer
what
is-
hell would be.
right,
a
so-
I mean, a Christian person, so
right.
I thought like that model of hell was not something
Right.
Jewish. I was always.
So
told
you are
don't
right
believe
and
in
wrong.
hell.
So you're right and wrong.
They never discuss
Yeah.
it. I mean,
Right.
Jewish people don't discuss it.
So what you were told is incorrect
Okay.
Yeah.
according to Jewish belief, but both of you are correct. Meaning to say that, as we'll see, Judaism does believe in hell, but it's different
Yeah.
than what's described in other religions. It's very different, very, very different.
Yeah, it's interesting
Okay.
because I was brought up conservative, right? And the way that we were taught, right, was in the afterlife, there's only how close you are to God, right? Not right. So the
That's
worst
what
thing
we
you
were
get,
taught.
what?
That's what we were taught as well.
That
Yeah.
what?
It's the closeness to God. So hell is just like
You-
the furtherness from God.
Yes.
So you either live in the rich area or the poor area of
Yes.
heaven.
How you spend your life is how close you get to God, right?
That's
Right.
what we were taught.
So
No, not necessarily like if
Meaning-
you're a good person's doing good deeds, you're closer to God,
Merit points.
right? Like merit points in the afterlife, right? And if you discuss good things and you focus more on the spiritual things and good things, then you get closer to you know, and you spend your life thinking about how to become a better person and how you can better society and everything like that. You get closer to God. And if you only spend yourself, doing things very materially, right, you're not thinking about God now, so you won't be close to God in the afterlife.
okay. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
can I say something?
yes.
Okay. Nobody's mentioned Gan Eden Paradise, Paradis.
So that is
So-
there's so heaven, paradise, Canadian, those are all words that are describing the same thing.
Same
Um,
thing. Okay.
yeah, so we'll be talking about that as well today. So when I mention the word hell, so what's the one what word what comes to mind if you had to fire or some the Satan as you mentioned, pain, or maybe big rakes with
Yeah.
torture chamber, right? Okay. So we'll see if all of that is correct. Now, so before we go into the discussion, another joke. You missed the first joke. It was a good one, but I'll tell it to you after. So there was a rabbi going to visit an elderly lady, and he says, it's come, you've come of age. It's, about time we should start thinking about the hereafter. So she's like, oh yes, I think about the hereafter all day long. Wherever I go in my house, I'm thinking, what am I hereafter? I go, I go in the basement. Oh, why have I come here? So we will be discussing what is the Jewish view on the hereafter. So you turn to your pages, your book's page 130. And we're going to start with an exercise, which will be quite interesting. And I want you, you can either, if you have a pen, or you can just in your own mind. Actually, if I bring some pens, that'll be helpful, right? That's fine. Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. You can have really good cruise. Right? They could on COVID on the cruise, they lock you up. You can't actually go into Hawaii.
Yeah, I know.
Right? You find some totems so you can now get bad luck.
Yeah, you have tidal waves.
Yeah, you have the tidal wave on a volcano. The volcano starts working.
Yeah, but you are a native kind of guy.
Oh no.
Wait, what is this?
Wait,
This is subjective. That's subjective.
Can pass these pens. There we go. And what I want you to do is to each of these pleasures that we have in this world, circle from 1 to 10 how much pleasure you feel from this thing. 1 being the least, 10 being the most. So happiness, a Hawaiian cruise, a lifetime membership to an exclusive country club, love, wealth, social status, wisdom. How much pleasure do you receive from each of these? Yeah, so you can take a pen if you want, feel free, or you can just do it in your own. Okay, and we're going to come back to this a bit later. So meanwhile, just you can just circle in your books. Oh, hi, Yael. Nice to have you here. And when you, don't share yet your answers, but if you just look at it, you can just think to yourself, what categories of pleasure did you rate generally as higher? Don't answer now, but just something to think about. We'll come back to this soon. Okay. So, sorry, I forgot to do the screen. So we're born twice, once from the womb, once from the tomb. Which basically what the idea is that just like in the video we saw, the two twins in the fetus in the mother's womb, for them the whole world is just the womb. The whole concept of world outside the womb is so foreign, it seems crazy. It seems bizarre to believe that there's a whole world with even the mother as a being, because they experience the mother from the inside. And it's very hard to try to think about and fathom what life is like outside the womb. The same type of thing is hard for us who are so our whole life is the physical life that we have here. It's impossible for us to fathom like that there's a whole world out there, a spiritual world that our soul goes to after we pass away. It seems something very very distant and very hard to understand or to grasp. And really, this goes to what Miriam was saying in the beginning, is like, how do we even know? Just like the twins in the womb, how do they even know that there's a world out there? Well, how do we know that there is an afterlife? And really, like, it's not like it's something we can necessarily prove scientifically, but it is something that the Torah is called, the Kabbalah is called, the word Kabbalah actually in Hebrew means received, right? Kabbalah means received, because this is what we were received through the Torah from God on Mount Sinai. This is the wisdom that we received. So in a way, it's a blessing for those that have this wisdom, or that will embrace and believe that these ideas, that it's something that we can know that otherwise we would have no way of knowing. So, all right, so now we're going to talk about the whole concept of why there is a hell and heaven. Okay, so to answer your question, yes, there is, but why? And it really goes to one of the most fundamental principles of Jewish belief. So this is the principle of reward and punishment. Now, all of you heard of Maimonides. We spoke about him pretty much at every lesson. He actually took the entire Torah and he distilled it to 13 principles of belief. Anyone familiar with the concept? The 13 principles of belief. Some people have accustomed to read them every day after the prayer. It's called the Shlosha Asar Ikarim, which means, for example, believing in the one God, believing that God is eternal, that God doesn't have a body, believing in the Torah, that the Torah is divine, believing in prophets, believing in the resurrection of the dead. And one of them is believing in reward and punishment, that God has set up a system through the Torah of reward and punishment, both physical and spiritual. Like it says in many, many verses of the Torah, if you do my commandments, you'll be blessed, and if you don't, you'll be cursed, and all these things. So that's the concept of reward and punishment. So this really brings us to the topic of reward and punishment. So as you said, reward and punishment comes in both physical and spiritual forms. So we're going to turn out to page 132, text 1a, and we'll go around the table. We'll go around this time the other way around. Avi, would you like to start first to read in page 132, text 1a?
Sorry, I've got my mouth.
Oh, okay.
Let me do it for you and then you.
No, I'm fine. The 11th of the 13th principle of Jewish faith is that God blessed he rewards those who observe the commandments of the Torah and punishes those who transgress its prohibitions.
Yeah, and then the next one.
The greatest reward is the world to come. The strongest punishment is to be cut off from the world to come.
So this is what the Rambam writes, the Maimonides writes, as the 11th of the 13 principles, is that there's this concept of reward and punishment. And he says that, we read in the Shema, those that read the Shema every day, it says that, if you follow my commandments, then the rain will come and the dew and all the physical blessings. But the Rambam says, the Maimonides says that the greatest reward and punishment is not in this world, but it's in the world to come. Either receiving the world to come as a reward, or being cut off from the world to come. In Hebrew, it's called karet, which means to be cut off, which means to cut off from the world to come. Soon we'll see that there is even people who are cut off from the world to come, they eventually also do end up in the world to come. It's only temporarily cut off. No one is permanently cut off. But what's interesting is he says that the most important of the reward and punishment aspects is the spiritual, not the physical one. So why is that so? And by the way, there are other commentaries that disagree, and they say that, in other words, it's a whole question also about what Olam Haba means, but I don't want to get to that now. But he says that the most important is the world to come, which is the spiritual reward and punishment. So if you go back to your exercise that you did on page 130, and really from those 8 categories of pleasure, if I had to divide it into 2 general categories, it could be divided into physical and spiritual. So for example, you have the cruise and the country club, wealth, status, those would all be physical pleasures, whereas love, happiness, wisdom, a lifetime of meaning, those would be more spiritual pleasures. So it's interesting. Would anyone like to share which one of those categories you rated a higher level of pleasure? Yeah?
Lifetime of meaning.
Okay.
So I don't do tens, but I did
But yes, okay.
in general. So I did 9 for happiness and 9 for love. Lifetime of meaning, I did 8, and wisdom, I did 7.
Okay, and let's compare that to the other ones. The cruise, how much did the cruise get? Sorry, Hawaiian cruise.
Hawaiian cruise got 1.
Yeah, right. So I'm assuming everyone has a similar pattern, maybe not exactly to the T, but yeah, a similar pattern where the spiritual pleasures are much greater. And it's not because we're necessarily more spiritual than we are physical. In fact, most of our lives run around, like we said, eating and drinking and taking care of our physical needs. But so this is not because we are more spiritual beings, but it's because spiritual pleasures are more infinite, right? Because physical pleasures are more finite, spirituality by nature is more infinite, and therefore everything is more magnified. So pleasure in a spiritual sense is more magnified than a physical pleasure. So now, can you imagine that imagine take all of your spiritual pleasures together, the happiness and the love and the wisdom, all of them together, the spiritual pleasures of this world, it says, is nothing compared to the spiritual pleasures of the world to come. So that's the reason why the Maimonides writes that the greatest of reward, if God wants to really reward us for the work we do in this world, it would be meaningless to reward us with just physical stuff. And that's why the greatest reward is the spiritual reward in the world to come. So now, at this point, we need to address the elephant in the room, which is the whole concept of reward and punishment it gets us very uncomfortable, especially from God. If we're talking about from parents to children, as parents, we have our limitations and we need to somehow manage them. So maybe we come up with a system which is not necessarily ideal, but it's what works. So we maybe, but nowadays it's becoming even frowned upon, on parents to use reward and especially punishment. Even reward, people say, you should educate them to do good for the purpose of good, not reward them with external rewards, right? So now this is even with, as an example from parents to children, how much more so from God? Is God, so petty that he's going to start, keeping track of what we do? And, it seems beyond God, and it would seem that, wrong for him to do it. And like, why? And not only that, but we're saying that Maimonides said this is one of the 13 principles of belief. That means it's not just something like another thing that we believe, but it's like so important. It's one of the foundational beliefs in Judaism. Why is that? So that's the question. So in order to understand that, so on a simple level, would anyone like to have a go at trying to answer? What do you think the reason is? Why would God have this system with human beings of reward and punishment? Why? To teach us. Right.
What?
You're saying for us to learn.
Yeah.
To learn what?
How to live proper lives, because if we wouldn't have reward and punishment, then we would all be maniacs and we would.
What here or after we die, we saying about heaven and hell?
Well, that's what the reward is, but it's reward and punishment for what we do in this world.
Yeah.
So why is it necessary for us in this world to know that the actions that we do have, what?
Of consequences.
Have consequences, right?
But I take it back to the questions. Do you really have to behave properly just because you're worried about being punished? That is the biggest question.
Right.
Because, okay, it's up to you whether you're seeking a huge reward or not. But morally, is it
Right.
that we do good just before we are afraid
Very
to
good
be
question.
punished?
Very good question. Okay. Yeah, we will.
The kids do good because they're afraid to be punished. So
So you're saying is that, seemingly we should be motivated to do good for the sake of good, not for the purpose of getting reward or punishment. That shouldn't be the motivating factor. Right. Okay.
That's why there's a separation between the physical and the spiritual, because you don't quite know whether, and
Interesting.
It's a distant future, so it's, I mean, if it was an immediate.
Like you do this and all of a sudden money in your bank account, comes, then we wouldn't have free choice essentially because everyone would do that.
We try to maximize it.
Yes.
So there is a kind of
Gave the system.
Right.
skewing of.
Right.
and how-
So some people like Avi, who are very altruistic people, they don't need reward and punishment. So this is on a basic level. It's, why does God need reward and punishment? Because, not everybody is so perfect. Some people that are more altruistic, they will, do the right thing just for the purpose of doing the right thing, and they'll live ethical lives. But, we live in a reality where not everybody lives like that. Some people, think about, imagine if there wasn't governmental, punishments and policing and all that, the amount of crime that would be. So in other words, it's almost like God, he knows the human
Fallible.
yeah, that we're exactly. And therefore, he has to use the system, even though it's a subpar system, because really we shouldn't have to rely on reward and punishment. But that's why he did it. So that's a very simple explanation, but we're of course not going to be happy with that. And we're going to explain a much deeper idea of what reward and punishment really is. So
So is that to improve the soul that we have been given? Is that the reason why?
okay, interesting. So you're saying the reason why we have reward is to improve the soul, the experience in the world to come. Yes, we learned that it's
Garment, so we are borrowing it, we are making it better and pass it on to the next one.
okay. That's an interesting idea. So, Cyril, would you like to read text 2? This is the Rakanti, who was a famous Kabbalist in the 13th century.
Do not consider the punishment prescribed in the Torah as comparable to penalties a person incurs for disobeying the decree of a mortal king. Not at all. Rather, they are completely natural consequences. For one who fails to observe the Torah commandment is denied the good that naturally results from its observance. It is comparable to one who fails to sow his field and therefore cannot reap a harvest, or one who fails to wear clothes and is then cold. It is as natural a consequence as the warmth provided by fire, the wetness of water, the satiation of bread. In the same way, it is the nature of each mitzvah to provide the positive consequences that are promised for its observance, or the negative consequences that are stated regarding its transgression.
So the Rakanti is actually saying something which seems like a subtlety, like a nuance, but it's actually a very, very big difference. He's saying that the traditional concept that we have reward and punishment isn't really, those terms, reward and punishment, are not accurate. Rather, what is it? It's natural consequences. And by the way, as a parent, this is actually something which is discussed in many modern day parenting books, that dealing with children, we shouldn't use random reward and punishments, but you should actually use natural consequences, like you stayed up late on the computer, so whatever. The punishment should be related to as a natural consequence for what they've done, not like, oh, I'm just going to punish you and take away your pocket money for 2 weeks. It has to be something it has to be educating them, so it has to be related. Yeah, exactly. So that's the idea of natural consequences versus the traditional idea of reward and punishment. So to give a very practical example of what's the difference, you have two flows, so to say. You've got work equals money, money equals food. So you go to work to make money, and you take the money and you buy food. The link between each of these is not a consequence. Work doesn't automatically equal money. And the proof is some people work and don't make money. Some people do the same work and make different amounts of money. So work doesn't naturally have the consequence of money. It's a sort of a human thing that we've added, that we said that work will equal money. Money doesn't equal food, because you can take money and buy food, you can take money and buy something else. Now, compare that to consequences to sowing, reaping, and food. You plant the seeds, and then you reap, and then that equals food. So that is a natural consequence. So, you can, like I said, you can have two people working the same job, making different amounts of money, and you can have the same food being sold in two different places for different amounts of money. So the link between work and money is food is something which was human, it's arbitrary, whereas this is a natural consequence. So what he's saying is that the reward and punishment for the actions that we do isn't like a parent, deciding to punish their children. It's just the consequence. You get what you do. In other words, in heaven, it's basically you get a mirror reflection of the life you lived. The life you lived, that is what you get to see from a different perspective, from a spiritual perspective, where you see the full truth at that point, but you get to just live the life that you lived down here. So it's actually a natural consequence.
Wait, really? Like, wait, is that really the thing, that you're living the same life and you're just like looking at it from afar and
we're gonna develop this idea. So now we just said the
Okay.
point. Yeah, we're gonna give more explanation to this idea. So to give another example, so a doctor comes to you, you come for a checkup, and a doctor says that if you're gonna live healthy and you're gonna eat healthy and you're gonna exercise, I'm gonna reward you with a long life. And if you eat unhealthy foods and you don't exercise, then I'm going to punish you that you'll get diabetes and whatever it is. So really, no, it's just it's not a reward or punishment. It's the natural consequence. Now, I just want to deviate, parentheses to address a question for a moment. Again, I'm opening a can of worms, which is if the natural consequence of listening to God and doing what God wants, keeping the Torah and mitzvot, means having a good life, and we said the reward is both physical and spiritual, then it's the famous question, why do we have righteous people who suffer and wicked people who prosper, right? So that is obvious question based on this. And there's multiple answers to the question. I'll just tell you one of them, and that is that, to take the analogy that I gave you before of a person who lives a healthy lifestyle, eats healthy, exercises, is that a guarantee that they're going to live a long life? No, they might be hit by a car, but it gives them the best opportunity. And then sometimes there might be things that are out of, other circumstances. So the same thing is for reasons beyond something that we can grasp, for whatever reasons beyond what we understand, God, might have other reasons why a righteous person might have suffering or a wicked person might prosper. But the point is by following the right path and living an ethical life and keeping, what God wants, it gives us we're doing what we're meant to do. And therefore the natural consequence of that is that we have the best opportunity. It's like wearing a helmet. Wearing a helmet when you're riding a motorcycle doesn't mean you're not going to crash. But if you crash, you have at least the best protection possible. So that's to close up that idea. So this idea of intrinsic consequence, meaning the reward and the punishment is the thing itself that we're doing. This actually comes from Ethics of Our Father. So Deborah, would you like to read text 3 on page 135?
The reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah. The retribution for a sin is a sin.
So the greatest reward for a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. Now, what does that mean? On a simple level, if you read the commentaries on the Ethics of Our Father, the basic meaning of that, the simple level meaning of that is that when you do one mitzvah, you're rewarded with the opportunity to do more mitzvot, and therefore it's like filling up your spiritual bank account where you can get more reward later in the world to come. So God rewards you. If you do one mitzvah, He gives you more chances to grab more mitzvot. But the deeper meaning, if you read the words really carefully, the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah, which means that the very mitzvah itself is the reward. Doing something that's right, it makes you feel good. You know that you're doing what's right. That is the greatest reward. More than anything else external, more than getting recognition and getting an award, just knowing that you've done something good, that is the greatest reward. And the same thing works the other way around, is the greatest punishment for doing something wrong isn't, sitting in jail, but it's actually living in your own skin with the knowledge that you've done what you've done. Let's say harmed someone else. That is the greatest punishment. having that, living with that shame of what you've done. So the same thing also applies to the reward and punishment of the afterlife. That is a natural consequence of the life that we've lived. Okay, so meditation. Oops. Upstairs.
Today's reflection meditation is going to help us begin to appreciate the massive influence that we have by performing one small deed here in this physical world while our souls are in bodies. There's somewhat of a paradox. On one hand, you see, we know that the physical world is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just one layer or level of reality, and that there is so much more to reality behind, in back of this veneer that we see, the physical world that we see. There are spiritual worlds behind spiritual worlds, behind spiritual worlds. And yet, at the same time, we know that what we do in this lowest world, in the physical world, has repercussions in the highest heavens. How do we wrap our minds around that paradox? That on one hand, we're in the lowest world, and on the other hand, we are affecting what goes on in spiritual realms. So the reflection that will help us with this is the visualization of a metaphor. Very simple metaphor. Imagine, if you will, a lever. What's a lever? A lever is basically two things. It's a stick and a wedge. You put the stick on the wedge, called the fulcrum, and you can lift things much bigger than you could without the lever. Now imagine you're lifting a big boulder, let's say. If you have a long enough lever, it's possible. Now when you are moving the long side of the stick, think about the fact that when you're moving that end just a little bit, it's causing massive fluctuations on the other end. That's like our world. On one hand, we're very far away from the fulcrum, but it's precisely because we're far away, then little movements on this end cause massive movements on the other end. Try to imagine yourself doing a mitzvah, a physical act. Something small in that it lasts for a moment. It takes place in one specific location. In that sense, it's small. And now imagine how that small movement is really moving the long side of the stick, the long side of the lever. Imagine how your small movement here in this world is causing massive movements in the heavens. We'll take a moment to visualize and to try to feel the leverage, the power that our small actions have.
So this is connected to the idea that we're talking about now, that the deeds that we do in this world affect everything that happens in the afterlife. After a soul passes away, as we learned in previous weeks, it's game over. At that point, there's nothing else the soul can do to enhance its
The account.
the account. Yes, exactly. Now, the good news is that there are things that people who are down here that can do, as we'll see at the end of the lesson, to help a soul, because we said the relationship remains after a person passes away. Their children and loved ones and relatives they're still down here. They can do mitzvahs in memory of the soul, and that can help. But the soul itself can't do anything itself. It's almost like helpless at that point. It's like it doesn't have hands and feet. Whereas now, when we're living in this world, we think about the power that we have, that the little stupid things, making someone smile, putting a coin in a charity box, those little mitzvahs, it's like the levers, those small things you do, but they have massive, massive effects in the bigger picture of the universe, including all the spiritual worlds and the afterlife. So now, after that long introduction, so now the question of, so what is hell? First, we'll speak about hell, and then we'll speak about heaven. So what is hell? So, Cindy, you were right and wrong about Judaism's belief about. We don't believe about hell in the same way as it's believed as it's in other religions and cultures. We do believe in a form of hell, but it's very different. And because of that, we also have a different name for it. We don't really, hell is just the English translation, but really the word in Jewish thing is Gehenim. You heard of the Gehenim? Gehinom. Very good. So in Hebrew, the term for hell, let's from now on, we're not going to call it hell, we're going to give you a more accurate English translation for it. It's not hell, but in Hebrew it's called Gehinom. It comes from Joshua, where there was people who were serving idols, and one of the prophets said that from that place, next to Jerusalem, a small area next to Jerusalem, if you read in Joshua, it mentions the word Gehinom, and from there they use that word just as a sort of a borrowed term for the concept of hell. But in the Talmud, it's called Gehenim. So now what is Gehenim? Gehenim is not a punishment for bad behavior. Remember, we said before, it's not. We don't believe in punishments in that sense, in the literal sense, and it's also not something which is eternal damnation. That's it. The soul goes to purgatory and burns in hell. No, we don't believe, because God, He doesn't believe in vengeful punishment, right? God, He doesn't do things. He's not petty in the sense that He has to, punish us just for the sake of punishment. Everything that comes from God is kind, including Gehenim. So what is Gehenim? A more accurate explanation is that Gehenim is a rehabilitation center. So someone is drunk or whatever, has issues, can't live in the society. Jail is actually very interesting. It's really almost not mentioned at all in the Torah, with one small exception. But Torah, generally speaking, doesn't believe in the concept of jail, because jail is just, you're locking them up, you're punishing them. It doesn't help. They come out most of the time, they're back on the streets. Whereas rehabilitation is something that actually has a purpose. It's there to help the person, become better, heal. That's what Gehenim is. Gehenim is a cleansing process for the soul. So why is there a need for cleansing, and how does it work? So it goes back to what we said before. Everything that we do in this world has an effect on us. So for example, when we do something positive, when we do something, a mitzvah, we give charity, we help someone else, it makes us feel good, but it also refines us and makes us better people. It brings out the part of us that is focused on giving rather than taking. It highlights that, and the more you do it, the more it develops, and the more you become a giving person rather than someone who's just a taking person. So the same thing. So the same thing is also, like we said, negatively. When you do something bad, it brings out the bad parts of the person. So now every person's soul remains pristine, because we said our soul is a part of God, and no matter what, even the most evil person has a soul which is a part of God. However, through their actions, a person who's lived a life of just doing bad things their whole life, what they do is they've basically damaged their soul. Their soul is still there, but it's damaged. It's knocked up. It's, I don't know if you want to look at my car, but it's a bit knocked up on the side, and we had a small, crash, and it's damaged. It still drives, but it's damaged. So the soul of a person who does bad things, it gets covered up. The spirituality of the person is concealed. It's not seen, and it's not expressed in that person's life. Whereas a person who does good things and lives a good life and does what God wants, then they're bringing out and they're the good side of them. So the purpose of Gehenim is actually there to sort of take off the dirt that was covered up on the soul through the person's actions. It's a purifying, cleansing process. So that's why it's more like a rehab rather than hell in the sense of being a punishment. God is saying, now you're going to be punished in purgatory. That's also why it's very important that in Judaism, Gehenim is a temporary state. It's not permanent. In fact, the maximum length that Gehenim can be is 12 months, which is why we say Kaddish after a person passes away for 12 months, because by us saying Kaddish, it helps the soul quicken up that process so he can finish the cleansing of Gehenim as quick as possible and move on to paradise. So therefore, Gehenim is actually, it's a stepping stone. It's not an end location. The soul has to be cleansed because the way it is, it doesn't have the senses. It doesn't have the sensitivity and the spiritual sensitivity.
Is speeding up the process.
We'll get to that. We'll speak about that soon. Okay, so this so Gehenim is soul rehabilitation. Now, we'll read a fascinating story from the Talmud. Has anyone heard of Acher? Acher, he was a rabbi in the times of the Talmud, he was a student of Rabbi Meir, who was one of the great sages. And he lived during the time of the Second Temple and after the destruction of the Second Temple. And he basically, midlife, he had some sort of midlife crisis. And he basically went from being a very renowned scholar and rabbi, and he sort of went all the way to the bottom. He became a heretic, and he ended up what is it called when you go to the other side? He ended up helping the Romans, and he became a traitor to the Jewish people. He went to help the Romans, and he became a degenerate. He became morally he was just he went completely crazy, and that he was known. They gave him a nickname Acher, which means the other one, like he's not the same one as someone else. He's not one of us. He's not the same person that he was before. Eventually, he passed away, and here's the story about him when he passed away in the Talmud. A very interesting story. Deborah, do you want to read? Text 5, page 138.
And I think you're that one.
Yep.
Was the former, was that Mishnaic?
Mishnaic, yeah.
Saying she turned to such public heresy and treachery that he was derogatively named Archer. Something. How do you pronounce that?
There, yeah.
Something else. But when Ther died, the heavenly court declared, "We will not afflict him with judgment in Gehinnom." Is it?
Yep.
Yep. Nor will we permit him to enter paradise. Their reasoning: we will not afflict him with judgment because he studied much Torah, but we will not permit him to enter paradise because he sinned egregiously. Because thought of discipline, Rabbi Meir said that he indeed be judged and punished, so that he may then enter paradise.
So Rabbi Meir, who was his student, and he still cared for his teacher. So what happened was the heavenly court said, he's done good things because he studied Torah for lots of his life. So because of that, we can't put him in hell. But at the end of the day, he's also done bad things, so we can't put him in heaven. So he's sort of stuck in limbo. So his soul was not able to rest in peace.
The purgatory, that's that stage before,
right?
Where it's undecided,
right?
Described.
Right. So that's a very uncommon scenario, which occurred with this particular person. So his student his former student, Rabbi Meir, said that after he passes away, he's going to go up to the heavenly courts and he's going to pray for Acher that he should be allowed into Gehenim, into hell, in order that he can then go to paradise.
Isn't that saying that there's some people that don't go to Gehenna? Right? Is that what that's paragraph is saying?
That's not the point of it. The point of it is not to say that some people don't go to Gehenna. The point of that Acher was a very specific person because he had very extreme spiritual qualities and at the same time very extreme negative qualities. And also he was in different times. It's not this, it's a very out of the ordinary situation that someone would be in limbo. But that is actually worse than going to hell, because when you go to hell, at least you're in the process. You're being cleansed, you go through the car wash, and then you come out and then you're clean. You're ready to enter paradise. Whereas Rabbi Meir, he understood this, and therefore, can you imagine, my prayer for someone that I care is like, please let him go to hell. Why? Because he understood that hell is helpful, even though it's painful, but it's needed. The real punishment is actually not being able to enter Gehenim and to stay in that limbo zone. So now, Miriam, would you like to read text 6 from Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of Chabad? He explains Gehenim as well. What's the concept of Gehenim?
And read it of any sickness that is contracted. This is similar to the process of smelting silver, wherein the dross and sediment is burned away in the furnace, leaving the silver clean and free of impurities. Similarly, for the soul to be able to experience the light of the supernal pleasures and back in God's radiance, it must first be refined with the spiritual fire of Gehinnom, whereby the negative is purged from the positive.
Right. So without going through that cleansing process, the soul would not be able to enjoy and experience the spiritual pleasures of paradise, of heaven. So it's like, if you have, I don't know, an analogy for that, but I don't know, a phone without Wi-Fi, you can't do anything, you have to have that in order to be able to utilize. So if you have a phone, let's say without, I don't know, Cyril, you can give us a better example, without the microchips, or I don't know, it can look all great, but if it doesn't have the things in it that make it work, you can't utilize the full potential of what it's meant to be used for. Battery, yeah, thank you. So the same thing is a soul without, when it's got all that dirt on the soul, it cannot actually then be in paradise. It has to first go through that, just like the process of refining to make gold, where the impurities have to be separated and removed. So then you can have the pure gold, which is remain. Now, to bring this a little bit more practical to us, to really understand what is Gehenim and why it's needed, we have here Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. He's a modern day actually Kabbalist. Well, his idea was actually to explain and teach books of the Kabbalah, and this is a very beautiful section which he wrote. Cindy or Daniel, would one of you like to read? So page 139, text 7.
Okay. Hold on. Okay. Yeah, what a shame. Okay. Then an individual will also see himself in a new light. Even our mortal physical state, looking at oneself can sometimes be pleasing and at other times be very painful. Imagine standing naked before God with your memory wide open, completely transparent, without any jamming mechanism or reducing valve to diminish its force. You will remember everything you ever did. You will see it in the light of the unshaded spirit, or, if you will, in God's own light that shines from one end of creation to the other. The memory of every good deed and mitzvah will be the sublimest of pleasures. But your memory will also be open to all the things of which you are ashamed. They cannot be rationalized away or dismissed. You will be facing yourself, fully aware of the consequences of all your deeds. We all know the terrible shame and humiliation experienced when one is caught in the act of doing something wrong. Imagine being caught by one's own memory and no place to escape. A number of our great teachers, and they're listed here, write that the fire of Gehenna is actually the burning shame of one's experience because of one's sins. Of course, These concepts, as used by our sages, may also contain deeper mysteries and meanings, but a major ingredient of this fire may be shame. How else could one characterize the agony of unconcealed shame upon a soul? We are taught, Talmud 2:10, that the judgment of the wicked lasts 12 months. The pain eventually subsides.
So we have to understand that we're talking about spiritual worlds. Heaven and hell is not a physical place, and there's no physical fire and pitchfork and any of that stuff. The whole thing is just metaphors. It's completely spiritual. So what he's explaining is that the fire is actually this, it's the feeling of shame, the sense where sort of you see everything. Imagine we had, this might happen actually, in a couple of years with AI, but imagine you had like computer screens on top of your head, which project everyone around you all of your thoughts. It'd be pretty shameful, I would say, part of the time. I'm speaking for myself, but that's what it is. That's what hell is. You've got this big projector where you're standing sort of in front of God, and none of this sort of stuff that mechanisms that we use for what is it called? Survival mechanisms that we have in this world will apply. So denial and covering up and giving excuses and saying this or saying that. It's like sort of you're in the world of truth in front of God, and everything, your whole life, everything you've done is being projected, and you see it in that light, in the light of the truth. And it's that shame, that's what the fire of hell actually is, a metaphor for. And why is it necessary? Because that is the only way you can cure. Because to take an example from relationships in this world, you have some people who are very narcissistic and egotistical people who are not capable of having healthy relationships with other people. How, if you send them to therapy, what's the process for them to be able to, have a real intimate relationship with another person? The first thing is they need to have some self-awareness of their ego and to be able to confront themselves and know, maybe I've hurt people, maybe the people closest to me I've hurt, and to be able to take ownership and acknowledge that it's extremely painful, but that actually can lay the foundation for a potential future relationship. Without that happening, there is no person to have a relationship with. The person is completely in denial, and so that's an example of interpersonal relationships. Same thing is with our relationship with God. And until what Gehenna is it's the idea that we're facing our reality, and we're looking at ourselves with our faults and our ego and all the mistakes that we made. We're acknowledging them, becoming aware of them. We're feeling the shame. And then after that, it can subside. But we have to be able to go through that process in order for it to be cleansed.
So if you take the two extremes, someone who was very good, who had no shame,
yeah,
right? They would not necessarily.
They go straight to heaven.
And someone who is very evil, who has no sense of shame, would have no self-awareness that they did anything wrong.
Yeah.
And what would happen in that case?
Well, that's the thing. What happens is when they go to Gehenna, then everybody experiences that.
Oh.
Okay.
Right. So their soul will see. Yeah.
So at that point in time, they would get that self-awareness.
And what he says at the end is yes, correct. And the maximum sort of duration that takes is 12 months, which is actually the yard site, the first yard site. But that's the maximum for wicked people. But for average people, it's a lot less than that. There's no exact amount of time. Yeah.
So hardly anyone is a tzaddik, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So we all going there.
So little things.
Yes.
Lurking up.
Yeah.
So when you go up,
yeah,
is there an account that decides whether this way or that way? And the other thing is there still awareness? Are you still yourself when your soul leaves the body? Does it stay you with all your memories, with all your loves, with all your sins, with
the good parts only. The sins are not everlasting, but all the good parts of you are.
And there is awareness? Is the soul aware of all that has happened, of past and present and future?
Sure. Yes.
So
It's aware of its relatives, its loved ones, and it's aware, has its own awareness, and we're going to get to that soon. We're going to explain what is heaven. It's very much an awareness, and it's a relationship with God, basically, in short.
So if it's only 12 months,
Maximum 12.
maximum 12 months, and someone's a bad person, they say, well, if I'm already bad, right, and I'm already going to get 11 months, I should just go and do as what I want to get.
Well, I mean, every person can, do as you want. The point that like Avi said in the beginning, we shouldn't be living our lives for the purpose of this reward or punishment. We should do it because we want to, live good lives and do the right thing. But that is the reality. And those 12 months could be very painful. It's very painful. The reality is not to sugarcoat this idea. It's the most painful experience. It's spiritually painful, not physically painful.
Maybe not measured
Maybe it's like torture.
in times terms, but
Yeah.
suffering terms of that sort.
So to lighten up the mood with another joke. So there was a group of women who were very I'm raising my hand. A group of women who were very involved in the synagogue, and they were communal activists, and they had chesed groups. They were righteous women. Eventually they passed away, and they were all what happened was they were riding in a bus together, and there was a crash, and they all died, and they were sort of up, and they were gonna be admitted straight to heaven, but the computers were down. So the angel said, can you just temporarily for a couple 20 minutes go to hell while we fix the computers so we can admit you into heaven? So they go to hell, and then a couple minutes later, the angel of hell comes complaining, and he says, we need to get these ladies out of here. So the angel of heaven says, why? He's like, because they started a fundraiser and they're installing air conditioners in hell. So now, eventually, we all make our way, hopefully sooner rather than later, to heaven. So what is heaven? So let's move on here. So the painful process cleanses the soul, and the soul is now able to experience paradise. The maximum sentence is 12 months. And I forgot to mention that also sincere tshuva, which means repentance, is something that we can do to minimize, even if we're at a point in life where we look back and we say, well, I've done certain things. But if we do tshuva, which is Yom Kippur, repentance, that sort of thing, that can minimize and alleviate the.
That sincere tshuva 12 months can be extended.
What do you mean extended? No. 12 months is the maximum, but it could be diminished. It could be minimized. So that can cleanse even for the most serious offenses. So now text 9. Text 9. We're back to you, Avi. Actually, no. Let's go to someone on the Zoom. Yael, are you able to read? Do you have your book?
Yes, I have.
Page 141, text
Which
9.
text? Text 9?
Text 9.
Okay. Each member of the Jewish people has a portion in the world to come, as it is stated. Your people are all righteous. They shall inherit the land forever. They are the branch of my planting, the work of my hands in which I take pride.
So everyone has, no matter who you are, doesn't matter your beliefs, it doesn't matter if you're how religious or pious or righteous or evil, every single person has a portion in the world to come. So ultimately we all get there. Now, what is paradise? Right, that's the question. So Alexandra, are you there?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself.
Okay. Do you have your book? Would you like to read
Yes.
10?
That's page 142?
Page 143.
Oh, 143? Oh, okay. Spiritual reward is abstruse and difficult for mortal intellect to visualize and grasp as long as the intellect remains attached to a corporeal body. Just as one who is blind cannot grasp the concept of colors, so the spirit that is engaged with corporeality cannot grasp purely spiritual matters.
So so what we're saying is this is sort of like a caveat, is that it's very difficult for us to grasp the full idea of what heaven is because it's a spiritual world and so we're like the blind person that can't understand colors. The blind person can understand that there's a concept of colors, but they can't really fully grasp the colors themselves. So with that caveat, we'll understand that, however much we're not going to fully be able to understand what the spiritual worlds are, but there are certain things that, again, through the Kabbalah, through the Torah, which was given to us, we know certain things about it. So what are those things? So Rina, would you like to read page 144, text 11?
Okay, page 11. In the hereafter, there is no eating, drinking, procreation, commerce, jealousy, hatred, or competition. Rather, the righteous sit, their heads adorned with crowns, and they delight in the radiance of the divine presence.
So this is obviously, again, we have to remember that this is completely spiritual world. So all these things are metaphors. The idea of everything you mentioned here, sitting and with crowns in their head. If you study the Kabbalah, each of these things have meanings. What is the crown and what is the divine presence? Each of these things refer to different levels of spirituality, really. So if we go back again, like we said, the exercise that we did in the beginning, where we rated the different types of pleasure, and we saw that there were, physical pleasures and there's spiritual pleasures. So again, like I said before, the spiritual pleasure of heaven, it says, is, I don't know if you remember, I'm going to quote something we learned in lesson 1. It said that even all the pleasures of this world don't come in close even to 1 hour in the world to come in terms of pleasure. And then it said the vice versa, that even the whole world to come, the whole heaven, is not as valuable as even 1 hour of doing good deeds in this world, because this is so in other words, this world is what's more important, but that world is more enjoyable, more pleasurable. It's like the retirement home. So to give an example what is this pleasure? What is this spiritual pleasure? Like, what is it? So this is actually what you, Cindy, and Cyril mentioned in the beginning, right? So in this world, one of the greatest human natural desires that we have as human beings is we crave to be close to another human being, to have an intimate relationship with another human being. That is something which we're wired for, and that gives great pleasure to a person, just to feel close to another person, whether it's a parent or a child or a sibling or a spouse. That is something which we all understand. So that's what the human body craves and desires for. The soul, similarly, craves and desires to have a relationship with its source, which is God. And it experiences that in paradise, in Gan Eden. It's done through the deeds that we do in this world. So in this world, we're filling up the bank account. By every deed that we do, we're forging a relationship with God. The Hebrew word for a mitzvah, for a commandment, is a mitzvah. Now, what does the word mitzvah literally mean? It's a Hebrew word, but it's also an Aramaic word. In Hebrew, it's a commandment because it comes from the word like letzavot, which means to command. However, in Aramaic, it also comes from the word tzavta, which is an Aramaic word, which means together, connection, right? Lashevet tzavta, tzavta means yachad, right? Together. Why? Because a mitzvah, by doing a mitzvah, you're forging a relationship, a bond with God. Why? Because a mitzvah is God's desire. It's God's will. So take an example of, again, human beings. If you have a spouse, and your spouse desires you to do certain things, maybe to clean up after yourself in the kitchen or whatever it is. And when you do it, and they know that it's hard for you or it's against your nature, you don't care about it, but you do it not because you want to do it, but because it's important to them, that makes them feel close to you because you're doing it for them. That's really what a mitzvah is. We put on tefillin, eat kosher, all these things. For us, we don't understand. It doesn't make any sense to us. But we know that that's what he wants. And when you do what he wants, you're forging a relationship. And there's a funny story that I heard to explain this idea. Is there's a wife says to her husband, "Can you please go to the store and buy me a dozen eggs? Because I need eggs. I need for baking." And he goes to the store and he's feeling all in love. They just had their honeymoon, and he wants to go and do what his wife wants. He goes to the store and he sees they have these beautiful roses, He's like, oh yes, roses. He takes the roses, he buys them. He's like, because I love my wife so much. I came to the store to, to show my love for my wife. And he brings the roses and he comes back home, he gives his wife the roses. And he's like, roses, I need eggs.
Eggs, yeah.
Right? So the point is, showing love isn't necessarily about what you feel like in the mood of. Rather, it's giving them what they want and need and desire. Same thing as God. God, he told us through the Torah what he wants. That's the mitzvah, the commandments. By doing them, we're sort of filling up our bank account, meaning to say we're forging a relationship. However, the irony is we don't get to experience or feel that relationship with God in this world because of the concealments of the physical world, of our body and all the other evil in the world. We don't get to enjoy that relationship or even see it or feel it or know it. We just have to believe that that's the reality. But after the soul passes away, then it gets to fully experience and feel that relationship that was forged through the commandments that it did. So that is, in a nutshell, what Gan Eden, what heaven really is. So doing a mitzvah forges an intimate bond with God. And paradise is the experience of the depth of this relationship. So now, in paradise, it's also a dynamic, evolving spiritual world. It's not static. The soul doesn't just sit in one place. It's constantly evolving and growing spiritually. It says that there are infinite sort of levels of Gan Eden. It's called Gan Eden HaTachton, Gan Eden HaElyon. There's many levels, and it sort of, what happens is because, imagine, again, to take the example of a human relationship. You can begin a relationship, and then over the years, the relationship can deepen and grow. So the same thing is our relationship, the soul's relationship with God, as it becomes more and more spiritual, it has a heightened spiritual sense, and it can then experience even higher levels and deeper. Yes. But the entry point is shaped by the acts that the person did when they were here in this world. Now, every year on the yard site, it has what's called a quantum leap. So throughout the year, it can be elevated, like, it can go up and up and up. But on the yard site, just like if you remember, we spoke about in the second week, that the moment of passing, why it's so important, because in that very moment, it's actually a very, very spiritual moment, because the soul is then liberated from the limitations of the body, and it's able to fully express itself and experience the ruach, the second level of the soul, right? So just like that happened in the moment of passing, every year on the anniversary, when that happens again, the soul has a quantum intimate leap in its spiritual paradise in heaven. And that's why down here we commemorate that by doing the yard sites, which is the different things that we do, as we'll see in a moment. We say Kaddish and we do a mitzvah in their memory, and we celebrate the yard site. So now, like I said, once the soul is in heaven, it's already game over. So then it's only about experiencing and enjoying, reaping the rewards of what it's done down here. But there is one sort of caveat to that, and that is that the people who are still down here, it could be children, loved ones, relatives, people who care about the person who passed away, we could do a mitzvah in their memory, and that will add money to their spiritual bank account. It will help them. Why? Because, well, we'll explain the reasoning in a minute, but let's first read the text 12. I think we're back to you, Avi.
When individuals act righteously are outstanding in service of the community, they generate tremendous merit for the souls of their parents. This merit is simply by virtue of their parents having served as instrument of their birth. It is the parents who enable their soul to be born into this world, which in turn enable the many righteous deeds that they perform. The parents, therefore, have a share in their I can't say that. Meritorious act. However, anyone's charity or prayer on behalf of the departed person are beneficial for the soul of the deceased. It is therefore a Jewish custom to give charity and do other good deeds on behalf of the deceased in order to cause satisfaction to the soul.
So it's very interesting what we're saying here. This is the Rashba, who was commentary after the times of the Talmud. He says that there's a difference between acts of mitzvot that are done in memory of someone. There's a difference if it's the descendants, like children, grandchildren, versus other people who are doing it in the memory. And what is the reasoning? The reasoning is very simple. A child, essentially, a child's entire existence is thanks to their parents. Without the parents, the child wouldn't be here. So really, everything that the child does, in a way, partially the parents get credit for. So therefore, when a child does a mitzvah, even if it doesn't matter if they have the intention or not, their very existence, their very being is really credits to their parents. And therefore, anything they do automatically will help their parents or grandparents or whatever up in heaven. However, other people, the same logic will extend to other people as well, only if they do it with that intention. So if another person, let's say if I'm going to give charity, I'm going to say this is in memory of so and so that who passed away. So they're basically they're causing me to do a mitzvah because I'm doing it because of them. So therefore, if I have that intention, it will help their soul, even if I'm not related. So even someone who doesn't have children, there's still other people can still do a mitzvah for them. So progeny essentially connected just by virtue of being born from them. So therefore, every action they do elevates their soul. However, other people, only if there's a meditated action that they're doing it specifically with that intention. So a lot of like charities, you can give charity and you can say, I'm doing this in memory of so and so. And by doing that, it helps that soul who no longer can do charity, but you're doing it for them. So it's as if they're doing it.
So is there a difference between doing it, let's say, for your mother versus your grandmother versus your great grandmother?
But you can do it for all of them. There's no,
right?
Yeah. There's no difference.
Mm-hmm.
So now, what are some mitzvot? And if you turn to page 147 and 148, we have over here these list of things, ideas of things that we can do to benefit the soul of people who are departed. So we have, for example, donating to charity, attending a Yizkor service. So Yizkor we have 4 times a year on 4 different of the festivals where we say Yizkor, which is a prayer for them, and we pledge money to charity. We study Torah. Fine. So these are different things that you can do. Some people write a Torah scroll, actually. Some people will, and this goes, the reason for the Torah scroll, why it's actually a very common custom, although it's not a cheap one, but the reason is because a soul is compared to a letter in the Torah scroll. Remember, we learned about like when the Torah scroll is burned, it says when a person passes away, it's like a Torah scroll being burned because there's 600,000 letters of a Torah scroll, like there's 600,000 souls, which we'll speak about more next week. But basically, the idea is that every Jewish soul is like a letter in the Torah. So some people have a custom to write or to commission a Sefer Torah to be written in memory, and then they'll write on the cover of the Torah that this is in memory of so and so. So those are some mitzvahs that people do. And then specifically, the auspicious times are for the number one during the first 12 months. Why? Because remember, we said the maximum Gehenim is 12 months. So during the first 12 months, it's the most important time to do things for the soul to help the soul during that time. And then every year on the yard site. And then the 4 times a year when we have the Yizkor memorial prayer. Okay. Now on the yard site, what do we do? So if you look on page 148, we see we light a 24-hour candle on a yard site. We say the Kaddish, we visit the grave, donate money to charity, and things like that. Those are different customs you can read if you want to see what to do on the day of a yard site. Now the last part of today's class, we're going to now talk about the Kaddish. Avi, you asked before about the Kaddish, so now we're going to learn about the Kaddish. Why is it important? Many people know, like when a person passes away, you want to say the Kaddish. What's the connection and why is it important? The significance, etc. So the text of the Kaddish is on text 13. I'm not going to read the whole thing. This got the text in Hebrew and in English. but it's basically the Kaddish is about really praising God. If you read it, it seems like a very what's the word? A bit of a mystical and a sort of text. It doesn't seem to have any connection to memory of a departed person's soul or anything like that. So why do we have this very strong connection that we say Kaddish for a person who passed away? Kaddish is all about praising God's name, etc. in this world. So, who would like to volunteer to read text 14? Your turn, Cyril, text 14. And no, 13 is the Kaddish, so I'm going to skip that one. You can read it yourself in Hebrew and English. That is the actual text of the Kaddish, but I explained to you what it is. It's just a prayer about the greatness of God and proclaiming His sovereignty in this world, etc. So to explain the significance, have anyone heard of the Adin Steinsaltz, Avin Yisrael Steinsaltz, very famous rabbi? He passed in Jerusalem. He passed away a number of years ago. He's the one who actually translated the entire Talmud into Hebrew, into modern Hebrew. So the Talmud is written the Talmud is written in Aramaic. So there was a rabbi, again, he's Israeli modern day rabbi, passed away a few years ago, Rabbi Steinsaltz, Rabbi Adin Even Yisrael Steinsaltz. He wrote many, many books in Hebrew, but his most famous work was he translated the entire Talmud into modern day Hebrew. He did great work. So this is from one of his books where he explains the reason of Kaddish.
Blessed and praised, glorified, exalted, and
No, the next one.
And remember, right?
Text 14.
Okay. Every member of the community of Israel is in a sense among those who establish and proclaim God's sovereignty in this world. As the verse states, "You Israel are my witness," God declares, Isaiah 43:10. Therefore, the absence of any individual creates a void, as it were, in God's sovereignty in the world. In order to fill this void, others need to intensify their work and to prepare on their own behalf and others on behalf of the deceased. Exalted and hallowed be His great name. With this perspective, we can understand why reciting the Kaddish elevates the soul of the deceased. The aggregate of a person's actions and accomplishments in this world define his or her life. However, the tally of a person's achievements does not necessarily conclude at the moment of death. A complete evaluation of a person's accomplishments must also include all that is accomplished as a result of the person's inspiration and actions. Therefore, when those who remain alive, and especially the person's children and descendants, whose very existence is a credit to their forebearers, do good deeds, they contribute to the deceased's balance of accomplishments. For although the deceased is no longer active in this world, his or her actions continue to inspire positive deeds and actions. This is why the recitation of Kaddish elevates the soul, because God is being exalted in this world as a result of and in the name of the deceased.
This is a very, very beautiful idea. Every human being, every person alive in this world is really an expression of God's greatness in this world. Just by being here, just by being alive. Imagine, if we look at people that way, it would be a different world. But so when a person passes away, what actually is happening is now there's a lack, there's a void, there's an absence of this sort of godly expression in this world. So the children will say Kaddish to basically substitute for that lack of creation, and therefore the children will proclaim proclaim God and God's greatness in this world. And by doing that, there's a double thing. First of all, we're sort of filling that void, and second of all, we're adding on another mitzvah for the neshama. It's a prayer, it's a mitzvah. It's not the most important thing. Kaddish is important. More important than Kaddish is doing, other mitzvahs, for example.
So one big question, who's invented Kaddish? How is the thing to do?
So, very good question. It's the Siddur, the prayer in the Siddur goes, the core text of the prayer goes back to the times of the Anshe Knesset Hagdil in the temple. but that only is like the Amidah and the Shema. And then over the years, they added more and more. The actual text of the Kaddish, as you see here, in the footnote under text 13, it was written in the Arizal, which was famous Kabbalist. So I don't know the original source, but that's the first place where we see it written in a prayer book. I'm not exactly sure. Let's see. Oh, okay. No, it just has here that there's a text on Chabad. There's a lecture on Chabad.org. I need to look at this after. It says here by my uncle, actually. My uncle, who's no longer alive, he was the chief Chabad rabbi in Illinois, in Chicago. So I'll look at that after. I'll tell you if there's anything interesting. So just a joke, and then we'll give one last final point. So the idea that the commandments, the things that we do in this world, can help the soul up in heaven. So there was one time a very evil man who was sent to hell. And one day the angel comes and says, we're sending you to paradise, we're sending you to heaven. So he's like, why? So he goes to paradise for 3 days, and then the angel comes back and is like, sorry, we need you to go back to hell. So he's like, what happened? Why did he send me to paradise? Why did he take me out? So he said, well, 3 days ago, your son wrote a check of $1 million to charity. So that helped you go to paradise. But now, 3 days later, the check bounced. Yeah. Okay, so Kaddish is a proclamation of God's greatness and holiness. It's recital lifts the soul, and God's name is exalted in the name of the deceased. So this is the last point, and it's actually something that Avi mentioned in the beginning, which is this is sort of wrapping up the whole idea. We're speaking this whole lesson about reward and punishment, heaven and hell being the reward and punishment. Where we're explaining that it's not really reward and punishment; it's really the consequences of the life we lived we get to experience then. But should a person, what should be now, we're zooming back into, to today, living here in the physical world. What should be the motivating factor for the life we live and the choices we make? Should it be all about the heaven and hell sort of thing, or should it be that we're doing it because that is what's right to do, and we're doing it? We're doing the right thing for the purpose of doing the right thing. That is really what's the most important thing. And there's sort of an analogy. I wish this was true, maybe in one day, Hashem. But imagine there was a medical researcher who came up with a cure for cancer, full final cure, right? So I'm sure he would be nominated the Nobel Prize for that research, right? Of course. And he'll come to the ceremony and get the prize. But compare the pleasure that this researcher would have in going to the Nobel Prize and getting the ceremony versus actually being there in the lab and giving his cure to patients and saving lives. Which one gives him a greater pleasure? Obviously, the prize, it's all nice and fine, but it pales in comparison to doing the real work of helping people. So the same thing is that, that is really, what we should think about is that all the reward and stuff from the next world, it's all nice, good and fine, but it pales in comparison to the life that we live here in this world. Because like we said in the beginning, that's where this world is where we have the real challenge, so to say, because we don't see what we're doing. Remember before I explained about when we do a mitzvah, we're connecting to God, but we don't see any of that. And if we do it anyways, that is really precious to God. And by doing the right thing for that purpose, not for the rewards, that is really the most important thing. So there was a famous Chabad Rebbe. He was called the Alter Rebbe. He wrote the Tanya. So he sometimes would go into this trance state of meditation during his prayers, where he would sort of be completely in a different world. And his grandson heard him sort of murmuring things to himself, and he heard him saying the following in Yiddish. If you look at text 16. So when our master and teacher Ibn Zalman of Yad would enter a state of spiritual ecstasy, he would be heard exclaiming the following. He would say, I want nothing at all. I don't want your paradise. I don't want your world to come. I want nothing but you alone. In Yiddish, he said in Yiddish, that is really the beautiful idea here, is that all of those things are really all good and fine, but nothing is comparable to just doing the right thing for the purpose of doing the right thing. So with that, we will do the summary points of this lesson. And then next week, we will be looking at the topic of reincarnation, and also how does reincarnation fit with what we learned about heaven and hell? In other words, when the soul passes away, does it go to heaven or does it come back into this world? Or how can they both be true? So we'll talk about that.
Lesson 4. Where we go. 1. God's rewards and punishments are natural consequences of our actions. 2. When we do mitzvot, we forge an intimate relationship with God. In the afterlife, our souls experience the effects of our actions, our relationship with God. This is the greatest possible pleasure, and is also known as paradise, Gan Eden. 3. At times, a soul cannot enter paradise immediately, for its inappropriate actions in this world diminished its capacity to experience spiritual pleasures. Gehinnom, a painful yet cleansing process, is temporary. Every soul ultimately reaches paradise. 4. In Gan Eden, the soul constantly ascends to higher levels. Good deeds performed in a person's memory, including the recital of Kaddish, elevate the soul to higher levels that it cannot attain on its own. 5. What we do here and now is more important than the pleasures or pain of the afterlife. Living in order to receive rewards in the next world, or to avoid heavenly punishment, distracts our focus from where it belongs, increasing goodness and godliness in this world.
Okay. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So,
Yeah, put everyone to sleep.
question for you.
Yes.
Very personal on
Okay.
this occasion.
Yeah.
But when my mum passed away, I was approached by a religious relative.
Mhm.
And he said to me, it's really important to have Kaddish said every day. And I can arrange it for you if you just give me 3,000 shekels, and someone will do Kaddish every day for you. What's Judaism, what Chabad thinks about this approach?
It actually is a custom. The money isn't just it's not a scam. They have people who will every single day, 3 times a day, because there's 3 prayers a day, will say Kaddish.
For money, not for the mitzvah. So what kind of a mitzvah is it if they're doing it?
Right, not everyone does it. Not everyone does it only for payments, but some people, there's nothing wrong with doing a service, for payments. So, if someone washes your car and you pay them, so it's a spiritual service. So obviously it's not to say that, a relative should do it for nothing, but there are people that would do it. At the end of the day, everyone has to make a living. So, I don't think there's anything essentially wrong with it. And it is something which is commonly done for people who don't have the ability to have someone to say Kaddish for them. They'll pay someone, to go every day to synagogue. You pay them for their time. You're not paying for the mitzvah, you're paying for their time. If you put it that, I don't know if that helps make it better.
Doesn't should go to her. It's like a stamp, it's a working someone. It's a really, really difficult.
Right. It could be the way it was done.
Position.
Right.
Feeling lost.
Right.
And money and.
It could also be right. It looks like they're just trying to take your money in your vulnerable state. It looks like that. I think when you look at it from that lens, it can look like they're just coming to extract money from you when you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
But I think, imagine that experience didn't happen, but we had learned what we learned about here. And then maybe you would come and say, well, I would love to be able to say Kaddish, but I don't have a synagogue and I don't have the time to go to synagogue every day and do Kaddish. The value, the spiritual value of doing a Kaddish is infinite, and I don't have the ability. What is it worth? So in other words, sometimes the question is, when we make financial choices, it's really a value choice. What is valuable? Ultimately, people have money for what they value. What we value, we'll figure out a way. So sometimes, if someone doesn't have money, of course, I'm sure you can find someone that would do the mitzvah even without money. But the idea is when you put your money where your mouth is, it shows that it's valuable to you.
But
So I think maybe the way it came across was especially without any
But if you have
education or
one-
context.
Well, but I would think that the value would be the person saying the Kaddish.
Yeah, not the
And